Hello, good morning, everyone. Can those who are behind, if you would like, or if you don't mind, feel free to move a little bit forward. Good. Thank you. I would like to welcome all of you to our side event this morning on the theme Catholic Perspective at COP27, on the sub-theme Climate and Biodiversity Justice from the Faith Perspective, and what next. This side event program has two specific goals. One, as we come to the close of the negotiations and we are looking forward to the outcomes, we are looking at, assessing the progress of the negotiation and the final document, but also the advances, setbacks, gaps, and setting up demands according to the Catholic teaching on climate justice concerns. As we all are aware, the tools of science shows us that the two greatest ecological challenges and climate change and biodiversity collapse, these are assumed by the Catholic social teaching as is clearly manifested in the new film, The Letter, a message for our earth. From these and the moral theological principles gathered in Pope Francis' encyclical letter, Laudato Si. Some of the related climate and biodiversity justice issues include loss and damage, just transition, women and gender justice, human rights, mitigation and adaptation, fair financing and just economics, among others. And these issues are brought together in this roundtable dialogue to assess the gaps and the weaknesses, the success and the strength that are expected to rise in COP27 final document or the final negotiation. The concerns and hopes are to be stated in a Catholic climate justice statement that we will be sharing at the end of our roundtable discussion. So once again, I welcome you all, and we will start by screening the trailer of the movie The Letter. For those of you who have not yet seen it, we'll encourage you later to watch the movie. So that's a trailer of the movie. I encourage those who have not yet seen it to take time to watch the movie. Okay, then I will then straight move to our presenters today. We have quite a long list of quite knowledgeable and experienced individuals in different fields as it relates to climate change and biodiversity that they will be sharing with us. That being said, I would like to welcome the first speaker, and that would be Father Eduardo Agosta. Father Eduardo Can you help us to contextualize the current COP27 concerns from the science-based challenges and the social teaching of the Church?
Thank you, Innocent, for the kind presentation. Also, thank you everybody here for being present. Today, environmental science warns us that the Earth has transgressed 5 out of the 9 planetary boundaries due to human activity, increasing the risk of reaching dangerous thresholds that could bring the planet to a new state of equilibrium, irreversible and unsuitable for human life and that of other species. Among these, climate change and biodiversity laws are fundamental and extremely important boundaries according to science. The warning from climate science is stark. The report on climate change mitigation by the IPCC Working Group 3 recently confirmed that the world must cut its greenhouse gas emissions, including carbon dioxide, by half by 2030 to stay within 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming limit set by the COP21 Agreement in Paris 2015. In the Paris Agreement, countries pledged to make every effort to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees. However, at the last COP26 in Scotland, countries showed to be far from fulfilling the agreement. The COP26 outcome document only offered intentions to phase down unabated coal and phase down inefficient oil subsidies without stating how, by whom, or when. At that time, the policy expressed concern that there were several gaps in the areas of mitigation, adaptation, and finance, elements that are fundamental to achieving the objectives of the Paris Agreement. We underline from the Catholic social teaching that mitigation includes unfailingly considering divestment of fossil fuels and their rapid and immediate phase-out against carbon colonialism, together with the development of alternative energies and financing for the just transition of countries most in need. As Laudato Si encyclical of Pope Francis points out, we know that technology based on highly polluting fossil fuels, above all coal, but still oil and gas, needs to be replaced progressively and without delay. However, along with Pope Francis, 7 years after the encyclical Laudato Si and the Paris Agreement, it seems that we still sadly say that with regard to climate change, the advances have been regrettably few. There is a gap between the climate urgency based on science, poverty and misery of a large part of humanity, and the technocratic discussion at the climate summits, which is also dominated by strong economic interests. However, the parties at the COP seems like they do not abide by the scientific basis of the IPCC. We also need to curb the cultural addiction to oil and coal and change lifestyles to integrate ecological education. I wonder, may this procrastination be revealing that parties are looking at climate engineering as part of the solution for the future climate? Upon previous negotiations in Glasgow, there is an incipient yet growing interest of several countries in phasing out fossil fuels production and consumption. It includes establishing targets and timelines for a just, fair and equitable transition. A financing system remains to be clearly developed to enhance renewable energy production, especially in vulnerable countries. Last July, the Vatican Dicastery has morally supported the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, together with thousands of voices from academics, scientists, subnational governments, cities, civil society organizations that are in the road of decarbonization for long. This has given impetus to the governments of Vanuatu and Tuvalu to formally request it at this COP27, to the government of Colombia to call for it, and to welcome it by several countries that are in the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, BOGA, created so that the use of gas and oil align the Paris goals. So far, in the current COP27 meeting, though the non-paper document has not yet mentioned the phasing out of fossil fuels, everything points out that the final document might include a call to phase down all fossil fuels, and not just goal as in Glasgow, which would certainly not be enough, or a matter to move away from the language agreed on COP26 as some people think. Let's wait until a bit more, a couple of days, to see what finally happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Eduardo, for trying to be that brief. So our next speaker will be Dr. Damien Sprouse. So Dr. Damien, can you share with us to what extent COP27 has tackled the issue of climate change and financing?
Thanks very much, everybody. So today I'm just going to address climate finance, talk a little bit about the Pacific and what climate finance means to Pacific communities, and then have a little bit of a reflection on Laudato Si and what Laudato Si tells us about the economics associated with this and where we're up to in the COP27 negotiations. So climate finance is about 70 different things that are covered by climate finance here at COP. They include climate finance around mitigation, carbon markets, adaptation, and loss and damage. But what I'm going to do is locate our discussion of climate finance really in the Pacific communities with whom we've been working. That's why I'm wearing this hibiscus. I encourage everybody to go to the Moana Pavilion and get your own hibiscus to show solidarity with the Pacific. And what we found, we were out in the Pacific communities working on this report, the Twin Clouds on the Horizon report, talking to people about what mattered to them through Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, and other areas in the Pacific. And really what we found was that there's $100 billion in climate finance that's being allegedly mobilised every year. But if you're in the most vulnerable communities in the world, if you're on islands where land is being washed away, storm surges are happening, salination is happening and people are being forced off their ancestral lands, it's very hard to get even $1 of this money to build a seawall, to help you plant mangroves. The Green Climate Fund is so slow. It takes, there's been a process for about 4 years to try to get some of the Green Climate Fund money there. If you're a local organisation trying to look after your area, it's almost impossible because they only want, they only give out grants in the millions of dollars. So what we really need is we need a change so that people can access climate finance so that they can take action to adapt their lands, adapt their islands and other lands to deal with climate change, and so they don't have to move off. That's the number one message from our report. So just to give you a few figures, the finance needs for adaptation in the Pacific are estimated at about $1 billion. That's about between 6.5 and 9% of GDP. Existing commitments are falling far short of that, we know, and we know that at this COP there was even an attempt to bring down that $100 billion amount and to lessen it even more. So barriers to local communities accessing these funds include lengthy delays in accreditation, lack of awareness of what climate finance might be available for, and onerous grant application processes. So we took this to the small Pacific island of Kuuia, where we met up with the Pacific Conference of Churches, Yango, and other key bodies in the Pacific Civil Society, and wonderfully they produced this document, the Kuuia Climate Emergency Declaration. And they took, as part of that, they decided to address some of these issues and establish a one-stop shop where local communities can go and access this climate finance and get help. So the Pacific is already working to try to deal with these issues, but it needs support from the global community to do more. The other aspect around climate finance in the Pacific is the growing debt risk. and the very large dangers of debt from after COVID and after the tourism industry has suffered impacts. But if you start delivering climate finance as loans and increasing debt, you're pushing Pacific communities and Pacific countries into further and further into potential economic crisis. Now, I just wanted to read in regards to this, because we're seeing all these payments as a gift or a loan from the global north to the global south. It's very easy to think that the global north is are the good guys here, and that they're doing things that they are out of the goodness of their heart. But I just call to mind Pope Francis's words in Laudato Si: a true ecological debt exists, particularly between the global north and south, connected to commercial imbalances with effects on the environment and the disproportionate use of natural resources by certain countries over long periods of time. So we should actually reconceptualize this and realise that these payments are not a payment from the global north to the south out of free will, but they are the start of trillions of dollars of debt that the global north owes, ecological debt, climate debt, to the south. That was we went through the Kuuia Climate Emergency Declaration on the small island of Randy. And where are we up to here now at COP? Well, look, there hasn't been, climate finance has stayed relatively with the status quo. There hasn't been a lot of movement on any more changes to localisation or any causes of hope there. It's really communities who are doing it themselves. I haven't seen any big donors say, we'll make it easier for small communities to get access to these funds. But we're keeping on pressing them, and in that, I guess that theory in Laudato Si that the economy and the way that finance is dealt with needs to extend beyond a sort of a profit motive and an efficiency motive to really meet human needs and to meet also this debt that is owed from the global south, from the global north to the global south. The report. Please come and get a copy of the report if you're interested, and you can see that the ways forward that we've suggested there. Local communities at the heart of climate finance and climate adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. David, for giving us the different aspects of financing. So I think there is a lot more around the question of financing. Then let's move on to our next speaker. We will have time to give some follow-up questions in a while. Our next speaker is Reverend Father Peter Ogonna Hillary. Father Hillary, can you share with us how creative dialogue between Laudato Si and ecofeminism can promote environmental justice?
Thank you so much. I don't know if you want the long answer or the short answer, or both.
I think the audience would need both answers, but just try to be brief.
All right. So the short answer is that the point of conversation is in the area of integral development. And by this, I mean that Laudato Si is talking about environmental ethics, and environmental ethics is based on, so the environmental ethics is based on integral ecology, whereby Pope Francis talks about the connection of all creatures, that we are all connected and we are all one creation, and that we cannot talk about the environment in isolation of human agency. And by human agency here, we have the positive impact of the human agency and the negative impact of the human agency. And everybody is talking that we use our human agency more positively because we are the brink of the precipice because we have used it negatively in the past. Then ecofeminism is saying that for us to be more positive in our approach to the environment, we need to look at the marginalization of the poor. the marginalization of women and the exploitation of the poor. That the exploitation of the earth, the marginalization of women, and the oppression of the poor are intertwined. There's no way we can talk about one without the other. And they are talking about the mindset, that it's the mindset that we use to oppress the poor. When we oppress the poor and get away with it, then we marginalize women. If we marginalize women and get away with it, then we exploit the earth. So it's the same mindset. It's like the libido dominandi, the urge to dominate others. That is what we are seeing here. And so, my reading of both Laudato Si and Eco-feminism is that both of them are talking about integral ecology. While Laudato Si is coming from the point of creation, the theology of creation, Eco-feminism is coming from the point of the triple domination of the earth, women, and the poor. And both of them are calling for ecological conversion. So what does ecological conversion mean in this sense? It means that we need to move from a developmental model that makes us kings to a developmental model that makes us kin, that makes us always emphasize our relatedness with women, with men, with the non-human environment. So we need to move from a kingship mentality and a kingship model to a kinship mentality and kinship model. For us to achieve this, then, we need to move from our idea of separation to connectivity. What do I mean by that? We know that we always have like this thought of black and white, the good guys and the bad guys. Like in our relationship, we have the global north and the global south. These are realities. But we need to think more in terms of what connects us than what divides us. We also need to think more from duality to diversity. So there are no, it's not like either or. We can always broaden the pie. We can always talk about other ways of seeing things rather than you are either with us or you are against us. And that is why we see negotiations stall, because everybody is saying, this is my position, that's your position, but we need to move. But what if all of us begin to move and maybe create an alternative position that works for everybody? So from duality to mutuality. Well, then we need to think from hierarchicalism to, from duality to diversity. Then from hierarchicalism to mutuality. What do I mean by that? We always think of the world and creation and our relationships as like there is a hierarchy whereby men are on top, then followed by women, then followed by creation. And we have the rich, we have the poor, we have others, and we have like all those hierarchical thoughts are things that we need to change for us to achieve this model of development that we are talking about. And finally, we need to move from neglecting people to recognizing them. And that is where the question of environmental justice comes in. We think about what are the contribution of women when it comes to ecological, to integral development.
But sorry to interrupt, can you wind up?
So I want to round up. So I want to say that when we come to the area of environmental justice, women are marginalized, they are not recognized. But they are actually the ones at the forefront of environmental justice. For instance, in Africa, we have women engaging in environmental activism in ways that men have not done in the past. In such a way that in Zimbabwe, there is a ranger team of all women who are guarding the forest against poachers, and most of these poachers are men. So if we begin to have this ecological conversion, then we need to recognize the activism of women, and we need to recognize our interconnectedness. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Hilary, for giving us connection between Laudato Si and feminism, women and gender issues, which is very key part of these negotiations and discussions that we are having here in COP27. Now, I would like to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Benson Wilson. Mr. Benson Wilson, can you tell us how climate change relates with loss and damage?
Sure, thank you very much to the organisers and to the moderator and to the other speakers. So my name is Ben Wilson, I work for Caritas Scotland, and I am focusing on the issue of loss and damage. So at COP26 we did a lot of work as SCIA, Caritas Scotland, to push the Scottish Government to take an action that it did take to COP26 to become the first developed nation to commit finance for loss and damage. And then this year, coming into COP27, we were thinking, well, what else can we do? What other major actors can be speaking out on this most important of issues? And one of the things we felt as a Catholic organisation is actually there's a role for the Church here to be speaking out on this issue, which is inherently a moral issue and an issue of justice. And so therefore we worked on this paper called Responding to the Signs of the Times, a theological reflection on loss and damage. And what we do in this paper is draw on the principles. Can you go back to slide 1? Sorry. We draw on the principles of Catholic social teaching to interpret the issue of loss and damage. And these principles, as many of you will know and some may not, about solidarity, about the common good, the preferential option for the poor, etc. And then we use the See, Judge, Act model of pastoral reflection. Can you go on to slide 2, please? Thank you. And so in relation to See, what do we see around the world in relation to loss and damage? We see increased intensity and frequency of droughts, of floods, of cyclone. We see that the limits of adaptation are being breached. There are climate experiences which we cannot adapt to and communities on the front line cannot adapt to. Many say that we are now in the era of loss and damage, and the science on this is very clear. The attribution science to be able to say the extent to which an extreme weather event has been precipitated by anthropogenic climate change has improved dramatically in recent years and given us more certainty. So that's what we see. So therefore, how do we judge this? If we can just move on to the next slide. Well, what we say, drawing on those principles of Catholic social teaching, is that we can see there's an unequal distribution here. What is the common goods in the world? Well, we believe that collective society, collective living, informed by Catholic social teaching, is about the fair and just distribution of the costs and benefits, risks and protections of collective living. And we can see in the case of climate change, in the case of loss and damage, there is a deep imbalance. There are some countries which are getting rich and fat and living lives of gluttony, whilst others are suffering from the consequences of that gluttony. Therefore, we also reflect on the preferential option for the poor. What is the preferential option for the poor at COP27? Well, we believe it is finance for loss and damage, because people on the front lines of climate change, they can't wait for emissions reductions. They can't wait for us in the north to transition away from coal, gas, and other fossil fuels. They need support. That stuff needs to happen, but they also need support now to deal with the impact of climate change now, and therefore finance for loss and damage is the preferential option for the poor here. And finally, therefore, how can we act? Well, in relation to the negotiations, we believe there needs to be a decision here at COP27 to establish a loss and damage finance facility. We see in the negotiations that there are two options on the table. One is that we establish the facility, and one is that we don't, and we might establish it in 2 years. That's too simplistic. It's much more complex than that. There's middle ground. We need to find that middle ground in the crucial last few days of COP27. And lastly, what I would say is that, well, maybe 2 more points if you'll allow me. Number one is that the US at the moment are proving to be key blockers on what needs to happen, which is to establish a finance facility here. If anyone has connections to our Catholic US president to communicate this case for action, I would love it if you did that. And lastly, I would say that this is fundamentally, the climate crisis and the issue of loss and damage is fundamentally an issue of peace and of justice. And it's really wonderful to be here with all of you people who care about justice and peace in this world, and I hope that we can win this fight together. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Mr. Benson Wilson for sticking to the time and being very straight to the point to help us to see the situation with loss and damage and what is going on, and also proposing to us some actions. So that being said, now I take us to our next speaker and the only lady in this round of table discussion. That's Ms. Lara Hicks. Lara will share with us how climate change is related to women, gender, and displacement. Lara, over to you.
Thank you so much, Innocent, and thank you to my fellow panelists. It's truly an honor to be at the table with you today, discussing these really critical issues. I'm from Minani International, a coalition of women religious. We represent 23 communities, and you'll see at the end of the slides here QR codes to our official statement on COP27, as well as our research and advocacy publications on family homelessness. So I encourage you to scan the QR codes at the end. Hillary, you gave a really incredible example of the ways in which we are being stalled in terms of women, children, and girls here at COP27. So I'm going to hone in, for the sake of time, on what is happening with For the sake of time, I'm going to hone in on what is happening in terms of the draft negotiations throughout COP27. So what we are seeing and what Minani International has observed this week is the continued marginalization and exclusion of women and then the topic of gender and climate change. The draft negotiation texts that have been released have seldom mentioned women, children, and girls. At best, maybe once or twice. There is still hope because gender is an agenda item number 14 at COP27. But continuing on the issue of climate mobility, this is something that is not acknowledged by many member states in their statements or in the draft negotiations at all. The cover decisions document that was released by the COP presidency did include mentions of women and girls and climate mobility, climate migration, those most vulnerable in the sections of human rights, as well as related to loss and damage. But just a brief mention here and there is not enough. Another issue I'd like to draw attention to is what Minani International has focused on for the past 4 or 5 years at the United Nations. We have been closely examining the issue of homelessness and family homelessness. Too often at COP27, we are missing out on the long-term consequences in planning these for most vulnerable communities. When people are displaced, upwards of 200 million by 2050, these people are made homeless. Their homes disappear. Where will these people go? Inadequate housing in slum-dwelling areas and informal settlements is not the same as having a home, and it goes against the values expressed in Laudato Si. So, to conclude, for the sake of time, I'd like to say, don't talk about us without us, a mantra that really heavily guides the work of Minani International and all we do. It is up to us to carry the voices of women, children, and girls, and those most marginalized and on the periphery to COP27, and we can do that. We still have time today on Solutions Day. So please check out our research publications and our official statement at the QR codes here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lara, for stressing out the importance of including the marginalized groups on the discussions and in the negotiations. And at this moment, before this team of presenters go back to take their seats, I would like to give about 6 minutes to have a few questions from the floor, comments directed to our presenters before they take their seats. So I kindly request Prisca, can you help us to pass the mic? If you have a question, you can be general or directed to one of the presenters. Please just raise your hand, and Prisca over here. The next one, you can already also raise your hand so we know where you are.
Good afternoon. My name is Cesar Kakere from Women's Life Wellness Foundation in Zambia. I'm trying to ask a question that relates to financing for loss and damage. When you look at the Ministerial African Group of Negotiators statements around climate financing in relation to loss and damage, there's been very little in terms of progress towards that conversation. I just want to find out how we could accelerate this conversation to a point where we can begin to see meaningful and concrete actions towards loss and damage financing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bain and Dr. Damien can respond. Mr. Bain, you can go first.
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, I agree the progress has been far too slow. As I mentioned in the presentation, I think one of the issues is that they presented two options. The co-facilitators of the negotiation track, they said we either establish the facility or we don't. We need to find somewhere in between that, but I think there is common ground somewhere in between that, which still means the establishment of the facility, but we need to seek some ground to the developed countries pushing back. But in general, I think, well, maybe a longer term question I think we do need to address here is the issue of finance. We've all seen, and my colleagues in Africa and Global South keep reminding me that they cannot rely on rich countries to keep their promises on climate finance. Therefore, I think we need a mechanism which is exploring new sources of finance, high emitter tax, international carbon tax, financial transactions tax, etc. I think that is the way that we're going to unlock the billions, if not trillions, we need for loss and damage.
Thank you, Mr. Bill.
I would just say, look, we need to I endorse everything that Ben said, but also just reframe that argument in terms of that framework of the climate change debt that exists between the global north and the global south is a really important way of moving the debate along.
Thank you. Any of the other panelists would like to add something? The next question, just over here in front.
Thank you to the panelists. My name is Cecily Fern. I represent Mercy International Association. I've been thinking this week about how do we motivate countries of the global north to take responsibility. And the narratives that we hear about climate change are about fear and guilt and shame, and these trauma responses and these attitudes are not empowering and they're not hopeful. But these, like as Catholics, we are called to be people of hope. And so how do we shift the narrative to have more empowering and motivating, hopeful messages to encourage countries of the global north to take responsibility for their ecological debt? Thank you.
Thank you too for your question. Over to the panelists, some suggestion. Lara, if you'd like to go first. Sure.
Thank you so much, Cecily, for your question. It's an excellent one. I think what has been really a tremendous source of hope for Unanimate International and in our experience interviewing and spending time with those on the periphery, those with lived experiences that are quite traumatic, that are quite difficult circumstances, both personal and systemic to go through. A major source of hope has been including these people and finding the value in their expertise from their lived experience. It's super important to include people in places of power. This is something that really guides our mission and vision and our research and advocacy work. It's a boomerang effect, as Unanimate International's Executive Director, Jean Quinn, would like to say. You have to build from the ground up, and it goes in two directions. When you bring people to discussions, when you ensure that their lived experiences, what they're going through, their concerns, and their ideas for solutions for climate change make it into actual text that becomes the outcomes and decisions here at COP and other United Nations and international bodies. That is a tremendous source of empowerment and hope for them and for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. Is Father ready?
Hello. Just to add to what Lara has said is, what doesn't touch the heart of human beings doesn't make us change. Facts, information, knowledge is not enough for us to change, especially because climate crisis, as has been said here on the table, it's a matter of moral justice. Morality, it's a matter of interior conversion. So we need to bring the experience, lived experience on the floor and listen to them, and that will make us take really serious decisions. So I really like the proposal of bringing more people in these kinds of talks. Thank you.
Thank you. Father Hilary, would you like to add something? We
Yes,
have a
just
few
to-
more minutes.
Thank you. Just to add to what Lara and Father Eduardo has said, it actually calls for us to empathize with others. There is the Angolan proverb that says that when someone throws a stone, the person that throws the stone can easily forget about ever throwing the stone. But whoever is hit by the stone will always remember. They will remember the spot it hit them, how hard or it hit them, what damage it caused, at the exact, they will always remember. And so, when it comes to climate justice, we know that real people are feeling the real impact of this climate change. And oftentimes they are not the ones that are throwing the stones, but they are the ones that are hit by the stones. And asking them to move on is very difficult because the issue has to be addressed, especially when the one that throws the stone continues to throw the stone and the one that is hit continues to be hit. And that is why I think faith organizations, the Catholic Church and faith organizations are very important to hit the point of conversion. Our mentality has to change. It's not about not being vulnerable. It's about looking at the precarity of the others, the precarious situation that our actions are creating, and how to empathize and enter into that precarity, even if it makes us all vulnerable, so that we can come out of the catastrophe that we are generating. Because the people hit by the stone will never forget, and they will keep pushing back. And once they get the power, they might even go beyond pushing back to something else.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers. At the end of the sessions, we still have remaining 4 speakers that will share with us, and then we will have a moment to have more questions in the end. So thank you very much, all the speakers. As they go back, I invite Father Eduardo over here. We have got a message on behalf of the government of Colombia that was very much interested to join us in this study event, so they sent us a message since they are not supposed to be, they were not able to be with us here physically. So Father Eduardo was requested to read this message to us just briefly in 1 minute and a half.
On behalf of the Colombian government participation in this side event, recognizing the urgency of making effective decisions that enable countries to implement measures in their territories to combat the effect of climate change and save the lives and livelihoods of the most vulnerable people, we call on all negotiators to make possible that the following decisions are made at current COP27. First, debt relief and cancellation. Debt relief, debt cancellation, and debt for climate swaps for developing countries during 2023 in a percentage that allows these countries to concentrate their public resources on fighting the effect of climate change now. 2. Phasing out fossil fuels with a multilateral agreement with a time frame according to science. 3. Structural reform to the financial international institution by 2023. And 5th, establishment of loss and damage finance fund under the financial mechanism of the convention. Colombia considers that the establishment of a loss and damage finance fund under the financial mechanism of the convention is an appropriate response for the UNFCCC, independently of other initiatives occurring outside of the convention to address the current situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father. Now I would like to take this opportunity. Can we give a round of applause to our first speaker, please? Thank you, and thank you all for your participation and active engagement. So, like I said earlier, we did not plan to have only one lady on this round table, the first group, but it was kind of intentional. Like Ben Wilson mentioned, he talked about the approach of Sea Judging Act. We decided to structure our speakers in form of the topics they're asking based on the Sea Judging Act methodology. So for the next round, shall we have Ms. Prisca Koffi from International Young Catholic Students Movement, take your seat, and Father Paul Rahmat from Vivat International, please welcome. Prince Papa from Adaptation Movement, please welcome. Sarah Bernard Agosta from Boston College, please join the table, and Maria Amparo Alonso Escobar from Caritas Internationalis. I tried my best to pronounce the names. I did the best I could. Sorry if I didn't do it very well. So this table is a little bit more of a gender table, so but don't mind, like I said earlier. Thank you very much, our panelists. In the interest of time, we will go directly into your presentations. The first speaker in this panel will be Koffi, Prisca, who will be talking to us about climate anxiety, especially in the young people. Ms. Koffi, can you share with us how climate anxiety is impacting the life of young people and how this issue can be addressed?
Thank you, Innocent, for the floor. Hello, everyone. And I'm very happy to participate in this roundtable, and I will share with you, according our methodology, the climate anxiety in the young people. Climate anxiety is very common among youth. They find themselves consumed by their reaction to climate change. Some young people find it hard to focus while at work or to stay present when talking with a friend. Others develop a sense of despair or impending doom when thinking about climate issues. Climate change shows that in the future we might not be safe, even in our own homes. Young people experience climate anxiety due to unemployment, poverty, unfavorable policies, limited support from authorities. In the part of judge, we will talk about the symptoms of climate anxiety, which are manifested by grief, panic, frustration, anger, disappointment, loneliness. These feelings are manifested because of the consequences of climate change on young people, especially because young people feel abandoned. The example that we have is the youth of young Catholic students in Nigeria who have recently suffered damage due to the climate change. Their economic activities have stopped, and some have been left without home. Some have not been able to go to school. This is one example of how young people are worried about climate change because they are usually the first to suffer the consequences. In the part of acts, we will make some suggestions that we can do as young people. Teach young people about 3 R's. It means reduce waste, reuse resources and recycle materials, organize tree planting days at school, and teach students because trees are important to the environment, and encourage children to switch off all the appliances and lights when they are not used. We also invite humbly the authorities to respect their commitments regarding the protection of the environment, and also the partners to not hesitate to finance the activities of young people to enable them to work because young people have potential. I conclude this message from the Pope Francis, published on 27 September 2021, who said, "It is not possible to start again without you, dear young people. To rise again, the world needs your strength, your passion." So, dear friends, young people, the ball is our court. I thank you for your attention. This picture is a planted tree which has been done in Madagascar with the young Catholic students. Thank you for
Thank you very much,
attention.
Prisca, for sharing your experience about climate anxiety working with young people. I must say your English is very good. Prisca, before, she's a Francophone, she speaks French, but she did very well. You all agree with me, our English is really good. Thank you. Thank you, Prisca. So now Prisca has shared with us about climate anxiety. As we move to our next speaker from the poll, can you share with us, in terms of climate change adaptation, since you talked about anxiety, how can we adapt and be resilient through innovation and efforts in response to water scarcity, catastrophe, like you talked about the floods due to the climate crisis? And you can also share with us some of the lessons learned from your experience and work in the Philippines and Indonesia.
Thank you, Innocence, for your questions. People in local communities are most affected by climate change. However, they are not only victims of the climate crisis, but also game changers. People like indigenous communities and local farmers have knowledge, wisdom, capacities, and innovative ways to cope with the nature catastrophes. It's a matter of surviving. In facing the climate crisis, local communities in the Philippines and Indonesia have endeavored to be more resilient and adaptive through nature-based solutions and an eco-friendly technology approach. River members have planted hundreds of thousands of bamboo seedlings in the lowest and heightless areas in Madre watershed of Metro Manila, Philippines. They work hand in hand with church groups, parishes, dioceses, school institutions, from kindergarten to universities, and indigenous communities to plant 1 billion bamboo by 2030. They also use digital technology to map the planted bamboo and work with universities in Southeast Asia to advance bamboo seedlings. Bamboo. Why bamboo? Bamboo has social, economic, and environmental significance. It effectively prevents floods and soil erosions because the dense bamboo roots form a water barrier. Bamboo also significantly contributes to climate change, to mitigate climate change because it captures a lot of carbon dioxide. The bamboo tree can sequester up to 1.78 tons carbon dioxide per clump per year. Bamboo helps avoid fossil fuel use and reduce deforestation. It has become an alternative, highly renewable biomass energy source. And furthermore, bamboo materials can be used for building construction, which is quite strong, flexible, and resilient for earthquake-prone countries. It also produces brickwells, charcoal, incense sticks, and furniture that can increase a household's economic income, especially for women in rural areas. Planting bamboo trees in a massive scale is a kind of nature-based solutions that contributes to climate mitigation and adaptation. It also enhances people's resiliency and livelihood, which ensures food security. And another story I want to share is about organic farming. Since 1970s, the Green Revolution has campaigned to use chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and genetic engineering to increase products and crops in agriculture. The excessive use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides has negatively affected soils, nature, and human health. The grounds become dense and unfertilized. Pesticides kill microorganisms that fertilize the soils. It risks biodiversity biodiversity loss and also dangerous to human health like cancer. Responding to the negative impacts of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, the GPIC study rooted in eastern Indonesia has introduced organic fertilizers for organic farming. The GPIC trained local farmers to produce bokashi, liquid fertilizers, and biodigestor from livestock waste. Using organic fertilizers has increased organic vegetables and rice crops and restored the soil and ecosystem. In coping with the water scarcity, the local farmers in eastern Indonesia are challenged to be more creative and innovative. Assisted by GPIC study routing, they use the limited water resources for watering dry land by utilizing the hydro technology of Barsa pump, which is cheap, affordable, and environmental friendly. Using a small-scale hydro Barsa pump, the local farmers can pump water from rivers in the lowlands for irrigating horticulture farms in the highlands. With that, they can plant from crops during dry seasons and double harvest 2 or 3 times per year. These are some stories of local communities coping with the impact of climate change. They use nature-based solutions and eco-friendly technology approaches to be more resilient and prepared to deal with the climate crisis. And moreover, they contribute to climate mitigation and adaptations and increase crop production, ensuring livelihood and food security. However, these decent works are limited in scale up and impact. Local communities need infrastructure and means to enable them to be more prepared, resilient, and adaptive in coping with climate change. Paris Agreement recommends means of implementation on finance, capacity building, and technology transfer for climate mitigation and adaptation. This means to be localized so that local communities can get access easily. Sound policies and affirmative actions from subnational and national governments are needed to scale up and build the efforts and capacities of local communities for adaptation and resiliency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Paul, for sharing with us some of the actions in the Asian region, and also for sticking to the time. I was about to say, Father, please went up, but that was great that you managed to keep within the time. So, as we hear from Asia, now the next speaker will take us to some of the experiences in Africa around climate change. Prince Papa, who is from the Laudato Si movement in Africa, can you share with us about the climate mobilization in Africa and give us some of the examples of the actions that you're engaging in? Thank you.
Thank you, Innocent, and thank you for our audience to be with us here today. Laudato Si movement, it is a global movement, and today I'm representing the work that we are doing in African continent. And I would like to start by quoting Laudato Si number 165, which states that we know that technology based on the use of highly polluting fossil fuels, especially coal, but also oil and gas, needs to be progressively replaced without delay. Our common home does not need us to protect it. In reality, what needs protection is the human who needs protection from his self-destruction, leading to the destruction of our common home. Quite often than not, this form of protection might task us to take distinctive positions which might not be popular. to take distinctive positions which are just and fair, and to take distinctive positions which are right. In the process of our discernment process on which positions to take, we are informed by the Catholic social teachings and the Laudato Si encyclical, which draws from various sockets of knowledge, including from science. I have an example here, that when Creator saw the destruction that was going to come from Lucifer, he cast her into the world. And when the destructive nature of man in the Garden of Eden was imminent, he was banished from the place. When Jesus saw the profit-driven business in temples, and he took his whip, he was doing this for the love of everyone. All these instances were deliberate and well thought of. Out of love, these decisions had to be made for the sake of other creation, for benefit of us now, and for the benefit of the future. And now out of love, must we take this position and name the evil. For love for society and commitment to the common good, which are very much outstanding expressions of a charity which affects not only worship, relationships between individuals, but also macro relationships, social, economic, and political ones. We are witnessing a growing greed in fossil fuel investment in Africa by the West. We are witnessing destruction of creation driven by the selfish personal interest. And we know who we are, and we know who they are, and we know who is suffering. And we must name these people who are causing this suffering without fear of the now, but of the fear of the future, should we be cowards in mentioning their names. In the East African region, especially in Uganda and Tanzania, we are seeing a proposed investment in an oil pipeline named the proposed East African crude oil pipeline. This ill-advised investment by a French oil multinational, Total Energies, is worrisome. In the Southern African region, we are seeing a proposed oil investment in the Okavango Delta. This by a Canadian firm called Recon Africa. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, we are seeing President Chiti auctioning parts of the Congo forest, including Virunga National Park, to Western oil multinationals. In Nigeria, we see the dark side of Shell Oil Company. Out of love, we must cast out these evil men from our communities. Out of love, we must banish these oil multinationals from our Eden. Out of love, we must pick up our whips and drive away these profit-driven entities out of Africa. We must do this because we are called to do so. We must do this because of the love for our common home. We must do this because it is what science says. We must do this because it is the right thing to do. We will no longer wait for others to sit in locked rooms to deliberate on what to do. The people will no longer wait for justice anymore. The people can see justice now. And now must we, the people, receive it. And now must we, the people, bring it to ourselves. And now must we demand the West to pay up for their sins and atrocities. And now must we demand for the provision of mechanisms to readjust ourselves from the evil acts of the West. In Laudato Si, number 5, Pope Francis quote says, authentic human development has a moral character. It presumes full respect for the human person but it must also be concerned for the world around us and take into account the nature of each being and of its mutual connection in an ordered system.
Prince, I request you to
Lastly,
wind up.
and now must we take up our whips to flog Total Energies, Shell Oil Company, Recon Africa, amongst others out of Africa. Is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prince, for giving us some of the actions or some of the examples of the situation in Africa, but also some of the actions that is being taken, but also some of the actions that needs to be taken, and that's very well noted. Now for our next speaker, Sarah Bernard will share with us about climate ethics, social movements, and moral agency. Ms. Sarah, what challenges do we face in transitioning our values into actions as we are now listening about actions and having suggestions for ways forward? Over to you.
Thank you, Edmund, and thank you to all who are attending here this afternoon. For each of us here at COP27, we have had the good fortune in the last few days or weeks to be here to listen, to learn, and to advocate. These are tangible actions that are born from our environmental and social values. As we approach the end of our session and the end of our time here at COP, I suggest that we take a moment to consider how we will bring the experience of COP27 back to our home communities and organizations. We probably have a sense of who we will be returning to. As my colleague Prisca so clearly outlined, we are often returning to communities of young people who are experiencing climate anxiety and grief in anticipation of the environmental destruction of our future. We are also likely returning to communities in great need of funding for adaptation and recovery that may or may not be coming. And we may be returning to people who are experiencing environmental apathy or who are checked out of the process that is happening here. As Pope Francis so helpfully highlights in Laudato Si, he remarks that people may well have a growing ecological sensitivity, but it has not succeeded in changing their harmful habits, which rather than decreasing have been increasing all the more. We will also be met with headlines from global news organizations proclaiming the failure of this COP. If there's any indication from previous results of COP, because it is more than likely that one or more of our strategic priorities from this meeting will not have been adjudicated in the manner that is just and successful. Narratives have the power to build up and also have the power to curtail agency. So how will we meet these narratives? I suggest that we consider what has brought us hope here at COP. As our interlocutor Cecily so helpfully pointed out earlier with the first set of panelists. Hope in the Christian faith, as many of us here know, is far from blind optimism. It is often one of the few sources that we can turn to when all else has failed. When we face dire situations, like the near inevitability of greater than 1.5 degrees warmth, even as we hold on to that priority. It is a hope against hope. One important way that we can sustain hope is to reflect upon the connections that we have made here at COP27 and the movement against the consequences of climate change to which we belong. None of us is doing the work that we do alone. I personally have felt moved this past week by the gatherings of Indigenous peoples gathering from across continents to share their witness. The number and the visibility of youth and young adult delegates and the coalitions of women coming together across sectors in this COP have been extraordinary. We may continue to build on these connections as we return home, those that we have made here, or as we connect with further organizations. For example, the wonderful work of the Laudato Si movement that Prince Papa and Father Eduardo are organizing. When we come together, we create new social imaginaries. We conceive of the future that we want, not the one that is yet here. This is what sustains our action and invites others to join us in the shared work as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you all for applauding. Sarah, thank you for being very brief and straight to the point. Now, before I open the floor once again for questions and answers, I will give the floor to our last speaker, Maria Amparo Alonso, who will be talking to us about the global goal on adaptation, as we are now talking about the way forward and what actions can we do, some of the main concerns on adaptation. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. When discussing with my colleagues of Caritas, we have a presence of Caritas members here who participated in the 2 weeks, and we have assessed somehow, and not yet finalized, because the code didn't finalize yet, on which points have been pop out in the negotiations somehow. For example, they are stressing that efforts toward achieving the global goal of adaptation must focus on moving away from the business as usual when in the scenario of increasing adverse impacts, risks, and vulnerabilities associated with climate change. So at least this approach of moving away from business as usual has been recognized. Recognizing as well that adaptation is a global challenge faced by all, with local, subnational, national, regional, and international dimensions. At least recognizing is a good step to move forward in the future, because this level that we discussed today about the local communities, the grassroots level, our experience as Catholic actors at the grassroots level is very important to bring it here. So this recognition has been included. Also recognizing that the need to address developing countries' current and predicted adaptation needs includes finance, capacity building, and technology transfer to reduce the climate change impacts. Recognizing does not mean that measures are put in place, but again, recognizing is something important in this long process of negotiations. And stressing on establishing a framework for implementation and policy cycle. These are few points we have observed as Caritas members during these days as pop out in the negotiations. But still, as CI Confederation, we are a global confederation present in 200 countries, and we brought and we consulted the whole confederation on the main concerns in adaptation. And yet we see some concerns on enhancing and the need to enhancing adaptive capacity, strengthening resilience to reduce vulnerability. And we also listened to the Indonesia example, but we have several examples from the Caritas family. Caritas Peru, for example, working with local farmers in the Peruvian Altiplano, shows how adaptive seeds can allow farmers to reduce vulnerability. But also we have experiences from Caritas Zambia, Caritas Malawi, Caritas Ethiopia in working with the smallholder farmers in adaptive seeds. So we know that this is working. Financing for climate adaptation remains insufficient at the local level. This was brought also before by Daniel. But we have also several experiences brought by African Caritases from the local level. The case of Marsabit, for example, in Kenya, in a moment where the crops are failing and they are losing the livestock. Yet, funds to them is not arriving. The lack of participatory approaches in climate change adaptation is not only to get more funds, that it is, of course, to get those funds to the local level, but the approaches on that is also important to bear in mind. We know, because we implemented and we are close to the communities, that when you involve the people on board in the planning, in the monitoring, this works better. So the participatory approaches in the climate change adaptation is indeed important. The limited and lack of transparency and accountability with climate funds, again, a part of the access to funds to the local level is to increase the transparency and accountability, because some of our members in Nepal or other Asian countries, they are bringing this issue that the local communities, local farmers, they don't know how to get access to that and participate, how they can participate in the coordination and the access to the climate funds. And yet, on this adaptation, and within this frame of Colombia, agriculture remains as a key sector in adaptation, but often is not linked to the agriculture priorities. There are key issues for us in working in several regions, the Amazonia region, for example, where you see how agroecology is working. So this ecological transition is just very limited, as the emphasis is still given into the planning and also the implementation. So this is a call to keep it forward and to implement it. And finally, to consider in the future, as we discussed, adaptation should receive greater focus at the national determined contributions, and as well as the DRR, because we see that this is important to address the gaps between adaptation and loss and damage, and to enhance the emergency response as well, and the increased coordination with local communities, local governments, and local actors. This is the localization approach that we also heard before, but this is the last message we wanted to bring, because we have seen through the Caritas experiences in the world that, for example, when mapping the risk of the communities at the grassroots level, when multiple players are participating on the ground and the social agents are participating, not only the local actors from the government, but also the local faith-based organizations on the ground accompanying the people, this works better. So the last call also to involve local actors, especially faith-based organizations in the grassroots level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you very much for sharing with us some of the observations that's been made by Caritas so far. The negotiations are ongoing in some of the proposals for the way forward for the future. Thank you very much. And like the previous speakers have said, the question of anxiety adaptation is very, very key on issues relating to climate change. I happen to work with young people in Africa in the office where Prisca is for about 5 years before I joined the International Secretariat of the Young Catholic Students Movement, where I had the opportunity now to be working together with young people in over 87 countries around the world in 5 regions. And from what I see in my experience, all these issues are cross-cutting. It's not only maybe, let's say, in the least developed countries, but some of these issues around climate change is affecting everyone equally in different ways all around the world. And the issues of adaptations, addressing anxieties are very key. Now, that being said, I'll open the floor once again for questions, comments from the audience. Feel very welcome, some recommendations. The floor is open. Please, can you help us, please, to pass the mic? Yes, thank you. Over here.
Thank you. Lydia Trumbo from Zambia Climate Change Network. We're a coordinating organization. And I just want to ask from the experience of Caritas, in terms of how do we build the strong movement. I'm looking at the portfolio of having working in 200 countries. Already those are masses that we need in terms of building up models or coming up with mechanisms that will work, especially when it comes to adaptation for the things that we are kind of looking for. So how do we really use those numbers in terms of really getting the masses involved? Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think there is one important thing which might needs to happen firstly at the local level, which is this coordination of all actors, no? So we always invite the members of our confederation to be coordinated at national level firstly. And for sure, this coordination comes to us then at another level, which is the regional level. Because there are many spaces undertaken at the regional level that sometimes we don't use. So we are also trying to open windows also at the regional level as well. And then at the global level for sure. So this is a space where this is happening and important. So we are always launching this invitation to all the members to get in touch at the different levels.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Joel Kelly. I'm from the Anglican Alliance. It's wonderful to be with my siblings in Christ. From thinking outside of COP and globally about strategy to thinking inside of COP and strategy. It's wonderful to be here. We've had some side events as well. But I don't think the faith presence, I don't think the Christian presence has been particularly obvious at COP. What are the panel's thoughts on how we can be more effective as Christians to make our faith presence and have moral imperative presence in these spaces? Thank you.
I think it's an open question. And all of the panelists feel free to answer. Yes, Father Eduardo.
Yeah, I agree with what Sarah said, that we are building the narrative, the faith narrative on climate. All the conversation here is finalized in a statement that's going to be presented now. That statement contributes to the Catholic social teaching and also to the Holy See and the dicastery messages in the future. So anything is lost, everything contributes to our narrative and our deeply in the thinking of how to care for common. Thank you.
To the speakers, someone would like to add something, please.
Thank you so much for your question and for visiting the Catholic panel. And I think your presence here today illustrates an important lacuna that there are Catholic events. I know the Lutheran World Federation has also been putting on events, and your panel as well. I would love to see at future COPs more ecumenical opportunities for our faith traditions, what we have in common, to speak to one another, and to have the opportunity to meet one another and see what we're organizing around. That would be one of my hopes.
Okay, as a young person, I would like to add that 2 days ago, young people from the Youth Interfaith, we had an event here where we had young people from all faiths around the world. So something, already young people are always ahead. So I think the next time the elders will learn from this. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to all the panelists. What a great panel this has been. I appreciate it very much. Just in relation to that question, I think, maybe I'll stand. It's really important, as has been said so many times, to hear the stories of those on the ground, and maybe in the future we can bring more of those stories and those narratives to help people make that sort of transition or movement of the heart. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we ran out of time. Like I said earlier, we have come up with a statement all together that will be available if you see on the websites of the side event, the schedule. You can click on the program. In the program, in the hand, you'll find a link to our statement, the Catholic Actors of Perspectives, that all of us have contributed to. You can feel welcome to endorse it, but also to share your inputs. We will very much welcome that. And that being said, I would like to thank once again our second round of speakers very much for sharing your experience with us, but also sharing your commitments with us. Let us give them a hand of applause. As they take back their seats, I would like to welcome Prince to share with us just a summary of the statement, and then after that, Father Eduardo to give us the closing statement, and then all the speakers can come for a photo, and those of you who would like to join us, this will be history when we come to COP28. We were there and we are here now. This is what we'll be saying in COP28. So feel welcome to join for the photo later.
Thank you, Innocent, for the wonderful moderation. I'll be very brief, and of course we'll be sharing this on the website, and we ask you to endorse this, read through, and also help us in circulation. Gathered in Sharm el-Sheikh at the COP27 venue, the faithful discussed the setbacks and gaps in the ongoing negotiations among the parties on key relevant dimensions of climate justice according to the social teaching of the Church. The message delivered by the Holy See at the beginning of the Climate Summit summarizes the key Catholic justice climate demands rooted in faith principles. Though admitting the road to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement is complex, actions on its 4 pillars are every day more urgent since the warming of climate science is unambiguous. Mitigation, adaptation, finance, and loss and damage. These 4 pillars are interconnected and are a marker of fairness, justice, and equity based on faith values. In this statement, we are looking at mitigation, we are looking at finance, and we are looking at loss and damage. And lastly, we focus also on adaptation. So I'll not go through because of the time, but we have comprehensive summarized version of this, and I think Innocent, you'll let us know how we get access to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Prince. Like I already said earlier, on the website of Side Events, you can access the statement. It will be available there. Just go to the schedule and then look for our side event, Catholic Perspective at COP, and then download the program. And then you'll have a link to the statement. And you can also find a link to endorse the statement. So thank you all for being with us, and thank you again the speakers, and thank you very much to Father Eduardo Agosta, who has been coordinating us in organizing this side event, for all the effort, for keeping us up at night, since we were all in different regions at different time zones. Some were during the day, some were having lunch, others were having breakfast. But we made it here. Thank you, Father Eduardo, for keeping us on our feet. Let's give him a round of applause. So now I give him the floor to give us the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody, especially the speakers, the panelists, all the work that have been doing before this beautiful conversation that we're having here. All our work is being taken into account for future actions among Catholic communities in the Catholic Church, but also it fulfills and it feeds the narrative for faith communities worldwide. So I'm very happy for this is happening. And you are all invited to endorse this statement. If you go to this, as it was said, to the link in the side events schedule, you can download the program and you will find the links to the YouTube where it is streamed. Also all the documentation on how to endorse this statement. Thank you very much for being here, and I have hope that this COP27 can make a difference ahead. So thank you very much, and I thank God for this time we have to go. Thank you.
The speakers, please can you come and some of you take a seat, and the rest of us can just stand behind you and we have a picture. Victor, please help us with the picture. You can sit. The speakers, let's take a picture and then we carry on the interaction. Because we have to leave the room. Yeah, sitting, yeah, some can sit and some will stand, yeah. The first 5 or the first 8 will sit, yes. Please, the audience also feel welcome to join us for the picture. for the record. Dr. Sit. Okay, the rest can just stand behind, please. Thank you, Prisca, and all the photographers. Please share with us the pictures.